Hi, I'm Corey. Welcome to Creating with Scraps. I recently had a question about the spine alternative that I shared, and so I thought I'd super quickly detail it out and show how I did it. One of the questions was about bulk and using the sewing machine and how the presser foot, that's the little foot that moves the paper or fabric along the base of the machine, how that doesn't get caught up or if it's too bulky for it. And then the other is, if you don't have a machine, how you can sew them in. So we'll start with the sewing machine version because that works identically. It works the exact same way. And in the previous video, I showed what I used. I used a piece of canvas and I'd sewn all the way around the edges because canvas frays. And then I used a ruler, but I shared this pre-coffee, so my brain hadn't completely engaged. On this particular ruler, which is an OmniGrid, there are 3 yellow lines vertically to show 1/4 inch marks. And then there are 5 black lines, well, 4 black lines, but one in the middle there that would act as a black line. And those I called 3/8, which is wrong because those black lines there's 5 of them, so 1/5. So these are 1/5 inch measurements, and these are 1/4 inch measurements. Actually, these say that it's 3/16. So if I had just looked at this well enough to read it, it says these black lines are 3/16. So what I did was on this one, because 3/16 are closer, I measured this out at 3/16 to show you that you can get them a little bit closer and the machine can still handle the bulk. And I don't have a fancy machine at all. It's a Singer Stylist. It's a very basic machine. And then here, I put them at the standard 1/4 inch. So the way I did it is I cut the canvas to the size I wanted, sewed around the edges because canvas frays. Then I used my clear ruler, and there are other clear rulers. This is a Tim Holtz clear ruler. Has a little bit different, maybe this is Tim Holtz, I think so, Creative Grids. Maybe it's, this one's not, maybe I have another one. Anyway, there's lots of clear rulers, and depending on what kind of measurements you want, this one gives you the same options that the one in my hand gives you. I just find this one a little bit easier to see. This one's got some of that grippy stuff on the back so that it holds in place better if you're working with a slickery fabric. All right, so lined them up, started in the center, and then moved it over and drew my lines. And I drew the lines with a Pilot friction pen. It says it's erasable, so you could erase it, but it also disappears with heat. Just a warning, I have had people say that in extreme cold and extreme heat, temperatures outside, that the lines may return. I've not had that issue. Another question, I used cardstock to put the spine hinges into my spine base, but you could use canvas. Just make sure it's a really sturdy fabric. You don't want anything thin for that because then your page isn't going to have structure. And I highly encourage, whether you're doing cardstock or whether you're doing canvas, to make sure you get a crease. So here's the same thing. This is a 2x4. And I used, well, it's behind the light there, but I used just a flat iron to crimp this down because it makes it easier to sew in and it makes it easier to fold over when you're doing the next piece. So I encourage you to pre-score or pre-fold your pieces, whether it's fabric, pardon me, or cardstock. All right. So this is my method. I sew in one side. I start with one side and I work all the way down. I generally tend to put a line at one end. I don't know how well you can see that. I did get a new light and put it behind me. I'm hoping to eliminate some of the shadows, but I could still do little ducky and birdie things here. I don't know how to clear that up, sorry. All right, so I put the line there, and that's my start-stop point for the pieces. It helps me make sure that they're lined up straight. And then you can see these are all sewn in on the piece of canvas. There's no pages attached yet. There's no solid spine. There's no cover. It's just the base of the spine. And you can use clips like this, the little quilter's clips, but I find it just as easy to use a low tack tape. I call it purple tape because it happens to be purple, but a low tack tape. And then so I've got, these are all ready to go. So I'm going to put of the ones I've done, I'm going to put the last one in. And hopefully it's close enough for you to see. So I've got all the rest of them in. And see, because it's pre-scored, it makes it a lot easier to hold this straight and get the pieces lined up. Then I use the long line that I've created there and the center of the score. I know this is black and it's hard to see, but the stitches show it better. So, and I need a black base for another album I'm working on. It's in my to-do box. And then line up the crease that you folded at the top and bottom of your piece of canvas. And then when they're straight, when the lines match up, then I'll just use my low tack tape and tape the paper into place. Again, you could use clips if you choose to. And I just tack it in a couple spots to make sure that it's straight. And it's reusable. I've used this same piece for this entire little booklet. All right, so I've got that in place, and then I bring it up to the light so I can actually see it, and I make sure that my lines are straight. And then my machine is set at a longer stitch, so it's just a standard straight stitch, but the length between the stitches is wider, or not wider, longer. There's more space between each stitch, and that way it doesn't act as a perforation. And then I'm thinking that you can see it right there. And so the bulk of it is to the left. I'd suppose it would work the same way to the right. I line the center of my needle up with the center of that folded spine. And I usually go a little bit slower stitch. This is the speed on my machine. Go at a slower stitch to show that, so I can have a little bit more control, basically. And then I start and I give it a back stitch. And then I just hold it in place as it works its way down. And you can see I've got all those previous pages in there as well. And I didn't have any problem at all with the presser foot. And this is the ones that is at 3/16, or almost basically a 1/5. So that's at the 3/16. So they're closer together than the 1/4, which is the other system that I used. And you can see there, it's lined up, it's sewn in, and I had no problem with the bulk. So, and then I didn't cut enough of those to do all the lines, but I do the exact same thing all the way across. And then these bits are ready for my pages to go in. I don't have any pages prepped, but here. Okay, so let's say these were my pages, right? Let's just say this is my page. Then this is the part where I come in and mark all of them at about, I mark it with pencil, so I know exactly where to line it up on these spine hinges. And I mark all of them at once, and you can do a quarter, you can do a 3/16, you can do whatever you want. It's kind of a little more difficult to see because of the pencil line, but I use that as my guideline. And then I will glue one side only. I'll often make another line so I make sure that my pages are straight as a guide, especially if my pages are all the same size. If they're not all the same size, I generally won't do that. And then I'll come in and glue one side only. So I would have gone this way, opened it up, made my line. Gone this way, opened it up, made my line. Then I turn around. Because I'm right-handed, I find it significantly easier to make a straight line when I am working to the right of my ruler. You can work to the left, but that's personal preference. I just find it easier to make sure that my lines are straight when I work to the right side of the ruler. Glue down one side only, and then my pages are ready for me to embellish or decorate or do whatever I need to do. And I do it this way because sometimes I'll want to sew a pocket on here or tuck something in the back, and that way it allows me to leave the top open if I want to, or close it completely. Just gives me some options as I'm putting my pages together, or as I'm decorating my pages. And I'll glue all of these in, and then I'm ready to do the next step, the embellishment step or what have you. But again, I only glue them in on one side initially. I wait until I've got them where I want them to glue it closed. All right, so there's that. That's with the sewing machine. Same thing without the sewing machine. You would sew it in like you'd sew in any other pamphlet stitch. I'm not a fan of the 3-hole. I generally prefer the 5-hole when I sew this way, but either one works. You do is most comfortable for you. I'll draw the line. I'm going to go again on the bottom. I'll draw my guidelines. I'll line up my piece of paper on to make sure that my center crease, center fold is in line with those lines. And here I'll use clips this time for this. I still, even if I'm using clips, I'll still often hold it in place with some purple tape, simply because it's easy to have these things wiggle when you're sewing them. All right, so I've got it in line. And then if you are wanting your stem or your end of your string in the center, then you start from the inside. Like, so this would be the inside of my spine where the spine hinges. If you want your strings to go up on the outside, then you start at the outside. Just a general FYI. And then I've pre-poked my holes. You can use a pokey tool like the Tim Holtz pokey tool. You can use your awl that you use for bookbinding awl. This is just standard bookbinding thread. And then you pull through. And then this is not my favorite. You can pre-mark your holes on the back, but I generally don't. I just find it harder, and I don't see so well, especially first thing in the morning. So coming back through this side makes it a little more challenging, but I'll poke it and then hope, okay, good, it lined up. And then I'll do the standard pamphlet stitch, and sometimes it'll wiggle because it's fabric and it's paper, so it allows you have the opportunity to move it back into place. And then I'll just keep going, doing the same thing. And you can do this same stitch, the pamphlet stitch, all the way through, and I probably should have made that a little bit longer. There you go. And I'll do it the same thing all the way through, and then I can do that for each of my subsequent pieces. So you don't have to have a sewing machine to have this kind of binding. And I find it a little bit easier because you don't have the bulk of your pages yet. One thing I find that when people put several, 6 or 8, whatever it is, and then sometimes they'll decorate some of the pages in advance, it's bulky and it's easy to get off center or cattywampus. And this allows you, by using this type of a spine hinge, it allows you to just work with a minimal bulk and put this in place and then add your pages. So just another option. I hope that answered the questions that I had. I hope that helped clarify it a little bit. And another question I got, and I forgot the last time, is when I did the Craftworm tour, this bag was in here. This summer when I was on vacation and helping my daughters and such, there was several yard sales and such that I went to, yard sales, antique sales, a couple of estate sales and that kind of thing. And somebody had asked about this, and I think it was at an antique store, an antique mall. I saw this old yo-yo. So somebody asked about the bag. They saw the bag and said, what's in that bag? And all of this stuff wasn't in there. Obviously, I use this to store things and get it home. But when I found a little, well, here's a cool cabinet card. And oh, there's for my daffodil book. So there's some vintage bits of lace in here. There's just a bunch of the treasures that I found this summer. So you can see like a couple, like I said, yard sales, antique malls, estate sales, that kind of thing. So there's a bunch of just more fabric and such that I just haven't put away from this summer yet. Some handkerchiefs that I got at a really great deal, and so that's what's in there. But this specifically was, or is, some vintage yo-yo, and I thought the size was perfect to make a cover. So what I'll do is I'll sew this onto some canvas, and then that'll be a cover for a journal. So there you go. There's that question answered. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you're well and enjoying a beautiful fall or spring, wherever you are. Be safe to my friends in Australia. I know they've had fires and other things, and then all the trauma and tragedy along the country. I just wish you well and take care. Happy creating.